Hmm. Well, good morning once again, everyone. Mm. This morning, I am speaking on the Tibetan book of Living and Dying by Sogyal Rinpoche. The Tibetan book of Living and Dying is considered a spiritual masterpiece. It's regarded as one of the most authoritative presentations of the Tibetan Buddhist teachings that have ever been written. And because, as most of you know, my beloved mom passed away 23 days ago on June 23rd. Um, I have just been front to back just absorbing this book. I had read it before, but it's helping so much right now, and I'm just finding so much incredible, rich wisdom that is so incredibly helpful. Um, and I've been experiencing, of course, the deepest grief and loss of my entire life. But I also know that mom is still existing in consciousness. I very much have been communing with her in a subtle body, a mental body. And I have given really the majority of my time every single day for the past 23 days to support her in this transitional state. And it's just felt like something so meaningful that I can do with my grief. I've been helping my brothers as well be part of this. And, if we have these teachings, if we have the trainings and these teachings and these skills, it's incredible how much help we can be. It's helpful with our living, it's helpful with our dying, and it's helpful with those who have recently died. I remember when my dad passed, and I'd never read this book, the Tibetan book of Living and Dying. And yet I felt when I was helping him through that process, I kind of felt like a divine escort into the light, into that infinite light we just sang about. I felt this intuition that just came upon me, and I'd never done it before. I'd never helped anyone make their transition, but I felt like I knew exactly what to do. And the hospice folks just let me, do my do my thing in really a very deep altered state of consciousness. And I just felt kind of like the medicine woman of me came forth, the shaman of me came forth and knew how to support him. But it was soon after Dad passed that I found this book. I was doing a retreat in somebody's cabin out in the woods without electricity, and I found this book, and it was such a gift from Spirit and such a profound spiritual help. And what I realize is that we in the West, for the most part, we're not privy to a lot of these teachings. That's why I want to share them today. Sogyal Rinpoche, writes that when he first came to the West, he was shocked at how Western society had no real understanding of death or what happens in death or after death. And, seeing that people are taught to deny it, or to hide it or to fear it, or that it means nothing but annihilation, or on the other hand, that it's looked at with kind of a naive, thoughtless cheerfulness. Sogyal realized that these wisdom teachings could be of such great help, and so he took the Tibetan Book of the Dead and he wrote this, um, kind of interpreted it for the Western mind, the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. So in the foreword, Dalai Lama writes the foreword in this book, and he writes, no less significant than preparing for our own life and our own death is helping others to die well. In my past 6 years of full-time ministry, I haven't talked a lot about the dying process or death. It's not nearly as popular a subject as, how we create reality. But it is actually such a part of how we create our reality. And, now because it is just so real for me 24/7, and it's so important to me now, I feel to share it because I realize, like never before, that this life we all live is so impermanent. We never know how much time we have. Like somebody just shared in the chat that someone just died suddenly, I guess yesterday, and another friend of mine that I know just passed suddenly about 5 days ago. So I feel like it's so important to share these teachings. They're incredibly important and valuable. Um, so in these 23 days since Mom's passing, you know, I've been in a really expanded, kind of an altered, such an altered, kind of timeless state of consciousness for most of the time. And really, from hours and hours of deep spiritual practice, it reminds me of when I would go to India and be at the ashram and do 10 hours a day of spiritual practice. It's just absolutely just changes your mind. It purifies your mind. It opens your heart and it opens your consciousness to a much wider reality. And I feel like I've been existing in that consciousness actually more than this consciousness of being in form, being a mind and a body, right? So I'm feeling an initiation into some of the deepest spiritual growth of my life. And so I feel like, you know, what I want to share with you today is maybe the most important thing I have to share that I've had to share in a long time through this process. You know, I'm aware that the practices I've been doing to support my mom's consciousness wouldn't be possible without this background of a lot of years of deep meditation practice in my life and also training with some really truly enlightened masters. Um, you know, because how we can be of the greatest help to those who are dying or who have recently died is having the capacity to connect to infinite consciousness and absolute reality. You know, hopefully where we all just went, even for a moment in meditation. You know, I've been watching myself vacillate between two distinct states of consciousness. One is the profound and the deep grief where I just sob and I just know to let myself. I was going to write a talk this week on grief, which I probably still will write, but I realize that's not it. That's not all that I'm feeling. I'm feeling this other thing that is, it's so much wider than that. And it's a way to take that and use it to be of support, which feels so meaningful and purposeful right now. So Sogyal Rinpoche writes that people who are grieving go through a kind of death when someone close is gone. It's like part of you is gone. And I have definitely had that sense, um, you know, being with these really raw, vulnerable feelings with so much compassion, you know, and knowing it'll take as long as it takes, you know. But the other distinct state of consciousness I've been in is merging my mind into that blissful stillness, into that light of infinite awareness, pure awareness. And it has a quality of profound peace. It reminds me of, in Sanskrit, they call it Sat Chit Ananda. Sat is truth, Chit is awareness, and Ananda is bliss. And they say that that infinite light of consciousness has those qualities. It is truth itself. It is awareness, unlimited, and it is blissful. So in the Tibetan book of Living and Dying, there are really extensive instructions on something called POA, and it means transference of consciousness. You know, in meditation, what it is merging my mind in the highest state of consciousness I'm able to open to, and then connect with my mom's consciousness, her mental body. You know, and you know what's helped me in this doing this practice is for years I've been giving these concerts and my music has a vibration. It's a transmission. Um, and so I'm used to transmitting consciousness through music. I'm used to transmitting it through retreats, through the meditations and the chanting. So that has really helped with this POA practice of transference of consciousness. I've also watched my teacher, Amma, you know, master teacher, transfer her consciousness to her audiences for decades. And I've received that transference of consciousness many times from her. In fact, one example was I was in India visiting Amma one time for a month. And one evening I was outside my room walking around the grounds and I saw, it was about 9 o'clock at night, and I saw Amma walking, and she was walking towards the ocean, which was like 4 minutes away. So me and a couple of other folks that were there, we walked with her and we all sat down at the edge of the ocean, and it was a full moon night. And I was right beside her, right beside Amma, and she just goes into samadhi. She just goes into that blissful union with cosmic consciousness. And I just felt it, and I felt that I just went with her. And she, it just helped me being right beside her to just merge with that absolute. And so she was a kind of bridge to enlightened consciousness. So, in the same way, this is how someone with the ability to rest their mind in the infinite light of consciousness, in that Christ nature, that Buddha nature, can help us. And it can help us even when we're no longer in our physical body. And so, this POA practice, transferring consciousness, in Tibetan Buddhism, it's a kind of sacred technology. And if we take the time to learn and study it and practice meditation, and if we can spend time with masters that can help our mind become more subtle, more pure, we get skillful at this. And it helps us live, of course, as much as it helps us die, and it helps our loved ones die, and it helps them when they have already died. So, what I love about Tibetan Buddhism and what I am truly realizing is that dying is a part of life. It is a continuum. And the Buddhists see it this way. They just see it as a different state of consciousness, but not as an end at all. And yes, it is an end to the present physical body, but that is only one aspect of who we really are. We say this all the time, but do we know it? Have we realized this truth? So, the practice of meditation in its highest form is really to gain the skill and ability to go beyond body mind identification and merge our consciousness with the absolute reality. And so, mom's, continuing gift to me, I've been more aware of her gifts to me than I ever have. It's like, wow, it's just incredible, the gifts that she gave me. But she's still inspiring me, and here she is inspiring me to share this talk with you. So Sogyal writes that the most powerful time to do spiritual practice for someone who's died is during the 49 days of what they call the Bardo of becoming, 7 weeks. And then there's a special emphasis on the first 21 days, which I have been doing so intently. And what they teach in the Tibetan book is that this can affect that person's chance for liberation, for merging into the absolute reality for all time, for being set free from the cycles of suffering, of birth and death and rebirth. And it can also at least support them in an auspicious rebirth, right? So, and in unity, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore believe in reincarnation, and they speak about that. So, we want to employ every means possible to help our loved ones. And Sogyal says it's actually never too late, no matter how long ago someone has passed. It can still be of benefit if you practice for them. So the day 21, the 21st day is important. And this Friday, my brothers and I, on the 21st day, we went to mom's house and we looked at a lot of photos of her and we read articles about her life. We read her beautiful obituary, which many of you have been reading on Facebook, that I've really loved what you've all written. We've played videos that I have from interviewing her on my phone. And we've listened to her voicemail, just, so much love in her voicemail. And we focused on all the virtuous actions of her life. And this is so incredibly important. It's said to be one of the most important things we can do to support those in transition who are in the mental body state. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Another one of the most important teachings that's been probably the most challenging for me has been that of releasing attachment to mom's physical presence. I've spoken a lot this year on non-attachment and non-resistance to what is and acceptance of what is. But one of the things I was talking about is we need to become aware of where our greatest attachments lie and work on them. In the Tibetan book of living and dying, It describes how important it is when we die that we free ourselves of attachment to all possessions, friends, and loved ones. Sogyal writes, Tibetan masters therefore advise grieving friends and relatives should not be present at a dying person's bedside in case they provoke a disturbing emotion at the time of death. Hospice workers have told me that dying people sometimes request that their close family don't visit them just as they're dying because of this very fear of evoking painful feelings of strong attachment. And I had mentioned in my talk 2 weeks ago um, that mom passed in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. And when we left her house, they wouldn't let me get in the ambulance. They said it was California law. And I even got in. I just got in the ambulance and they wouldn't drive until I got out. And because of course time was of essence, I just surrendered and I got out and I followed them very closely in my car. But when I reflect on it now, I think mom felt more free to leave, traveling down the highway. She always loved traveling down the highway. For many years, she would travel from Florida to California and back in her little truck and camper. She had a little Datsun truck, and she would camp all along the way. She loved camping. And I think it was easiest for her to pass without her children present and sobbing and feeling their attachment to her. I think she felt more freedom in the ambulance to make her exit. And, as I shared 2 weeks ago, I so clearly felt the moment she lifted out of her physical body. I had been, right behind the ambulance. We are going pretty fast, and I had been sobbing loudly. And then all of a sudden, this profound calm and this utter peace came over me. And I said, "You just left. You just left." And there was this stillness and this peace, and I felt the letting go in me that she was feeling that connected to her. So Sogyal writes, I advise everyone to do their best to work out attachment and grief with a dying person before death comes. Cry together, express your love, and say goodbye, but try to finish with this process before the actual moment of death arrives. Well, that is so much easier said than done, especially with your mom, with a parent, with your spouse. But I actually have been working for a while with my attachment to mom. I know it's my greatest attachment. And I can see that in purifying my love for her, and loving her as I release and trust in her journey and in mine, that is helping. That is helping her. It's helping me, of course. So Sogyal writes that if possible, it's best if friends and relatives do not show excessive grief at the moment of death because the consciousness of the dying person is at that moment exceptionally vulnerable. It is said that your crying and tears around a person's bedside are experienced like thunder and hail. At the hospital, after they stopped trying to revive mom, I went immediately into prayer and I was chanting Om. And my brothers were there, Chuck was there. And I just very lightly caressed the top of her head because it's important to leave the body out the top of the head. And I did all I could to keep my attention on the infinite light, knowing she was acutely aware of that incredibly beautiful light and presence of love that you hear in so many near-death experiences. Sogyal describes this one near-death experience of a man who almost drowned when he was 14. I love this description. You can feel it. He said, as I reached the source of the light, I could see in. I cannot begin to describe in human terms the feelings I had over what I saw. It was a giant, infinite world of calm and love and energy and beauty. It was as though human life was unimportant compared to this. And yet it urged the importance of life at the same time as it solicited death as a means to a different and better life. It was all being, all beauty, all meaning for all existence. It was all the energy of the universe forever in one place. Yeah, the Tibetan teachings describe this moment where the subtle body leaves the physical body as the dawning of the ground of luminosity or clear light, where consciousness itself dissolves into the all-encompassing space of truth. And so it's said that when the person that's dying sees this clear light at that moment of death, that this is a great opportunity for liberation, for Buddha, merging in Buddha nature, Christ nature. And, but to recognize this moment, one needs to have a refined mind that's steeped in meditative practice, because all habitual tendencies of the ordinary mind need to have been purified while one was living. So you see in this teaching that our spiritual practice, it not only raises our consciousness as we live, but it prepares us for this moment so that nothing comes between you and this state of omniscience. I felt Mom in that moment when she was out of her physical body and she was witnessing this luminosity. It was so similar to the most blissful states, deepest states of meditation that I have ever experienced. So Sogyal describes how if one has a lot of spiritual mastery, one can merge into this light and be liberated at once. If one still has an active ordinary mind, though, in life, one will experience oneself soon after observing the light as a mental body. And this is called entering the Bardo of becoming, which can last for 7 weeks, 49 days. Now, the description of what this mental body is like is fascinating, because in this Bardo of becoming, the consciousness becomes much lighter. It's completely mobile. Sogyal writes, our mental body in the Bardo of becoming has a number of special characteristics. It has a form similar to the body of the life just lived, yet without any defects and in the prime of life. Even if you are handicapped or sick in this life, you'll have a perfect mental body in the Bardo. And this body can go wherever it wishes unobstructedly, just by thinking. It possesses all its senses. It is extremely light, lucid, and mobile, and its awareness is said to be 7 times clearer than in life. I could really feel this with Mom. It has a kind of clairvoyance. It's not under conscious control, but it gives the mental body the ability to read others' minds. Mom came to me in 2 dreams this week, and in the dreams, we were communicating without speaking. And this is how it is in the mental body. You just feel each other's thoughts. When I got home from the hospital the night Mom passed, hours later, I felt her presence really strongly. I think I mentioned that we did a life review, and I felt our minds unite, and I could easily feel and hear her thinking, and she could feel and hear mine. In the Tibetan book, they say those who have died can't hear you, but in that first day and that first week, I especially felt like I could receive her. And I think that's because of the meditation practice. But one of the things that's so important when the soul passes is forgiveness. And this is why POA, the transference of consciousness, if you're in the consciousness of that infinite love, you bring this sense of forgiveness already given. You bring this sense that everything is held and embraced in love. All is already forgiven. All is well. All is all right. And that's so important for that person to be able to let go of any regret or guilt or shame. It's important, Sogyal says, more than anything else, to keep focused on that person's virtuous deeds that they did in their life. We want to keep remembering all the moments of good that they brought. We want to remember the love, the kindness, the generosity, the gratitude, the peace, all the blessings that they offered in the years of their living. And that's because they're in a mental body where thought is amplified. And so if there's a focus on anything negative, like on regrets, it's very painful in that mental body. Sogyal writes, always when you are with a dying person or connecting with the mental body of the dead, dwell on what they have accomplished and done well. You know, with Mom, I keep reminding her of all the love she gave me and gave my brothers and gave this world, all her teachings, all the blessings she offered, all her creativity and artistry, and all the animals she took home from shelters and rehabilitated. So important to focus continually on the virtue of that person's life. So, the last thing I want to mention is that the consciousness of the mental body, when it's near completion of this time in the Bardo, it can be, I think the shortest is 21 days up to 7 weeks. It's helpful if we make a one pointed and really concentrated wish that they are reborn in a pure realm. They call it a Buddha realm, where it's enlightened beings and it's love and it's unity. It's you know, a beautiful, beautiful place to be, or in a human being realm with a loving family, an auspicious birth where they're blessed with access to spiritual teachings and where loving kindness is abundant. So I've been really focusing on these possibilities for Mom. So as I close today, you know, I feel like I edited and edited and edited this 500-page book, but I realize I've only scratched the surface of sharing the profound teachings. And what I also want to say is that though this is very Tibetan Buddhist, you can you can take it and put it into your own spiritual language. It actually is very universal. So I hope that you might explore these teachings on your own. You know, our life and our death can be profoundly conscious. It's great when we can talk about death and not be afraid of it and not deny it and see it just as a continuum, as a part of life and not an end, just a change in consciousness. You know, I have never been so acutely aware that we never know how much time we have here. The Dalai Lama wrote, "These practices are part of my daily practice also. And because of this, I somehow feel a sense of excitement when I think about the experience of death." Find that so inspiring. You know, so may these teachings that I've shared today, may they be of benefit to you. May they be of benefit to your loved ones and your family and all your relations and all of our society, so that all beings may be fearless, all beings may be at peace and filled with loving kindness in our living, in our dying, and in our eternal being. Om Shanti. Om Peace.
Thank you, Kathy.